Hey there, it's Sai Satwik again from Modern Education. So today, let us discuss about diabetes. Diabetes can be basically classified into two types. One is diabetes mellitus and the other one is diabetes insipidus. So this classification is not based on the effects it gives. It is based on how that person is being affected, the way of cause by diabetes, right? So the who and all got diabetes mellitus, they are being affected by a different cause, and who got insipidus, they are being affected by some other method. So but both the result gives the same diabetes, right? What exactly is diabetes? Diabetes can be caused when there is a lot of glucose, you can say excess of glucose in blood. So let us just discuss a little about diabetes as well as insulin, and then we'll move on to the different types of diabetes. So diabetes, we know that diabetes is excess of glucose in blood. Glucose is still good, but anything which taken in excess would be very harmful for our body. So diabetes, you can say it is the excess of glucose in our blood. And the other one, diabetes, remember this point that diabetes is a chronic disease, right? I'll just write it here. Okay, I'll write it here. Diabetes is a chronic disease. What exactly is a chronic disease? A disease which lasts for years or lifelong is known as a chronic disease. This disease can be mainly affected by, mostly it's affected by genetics because of genes. That's the reason many members get affected by diabetes, and it's a chronic disease. It lasts for years or you can say lifelong. And in these two cases, mellitus and insipidus is very rare to get affected with, right? So insipidus, you can say like in 1 in 1,000 people you can get affected. This is a very rare case, but this is little common, diabetes mellitus, comparatively if you see. Now let's discuss about insulin. Now insulin is a hormone as well as you can say it's a protein. Insulin, the main function of insulin is to convert glucose, which you know, into glycogen. Let me just write it here. So glucose converting to glycogen, right? This thing, to convert glucose to glycogen, insulin helps it, right? So insulin helps to convert glucose to glycogen. Now let me explain you what exactly is glycogen. So when we take in food which is rich in glucose or has glucose, right? We take in glucose, but our body cannot store glucose, right? It cannot store glucose in that exact form. It will be storing glucose in an other form in which it is easy to store, and that form is known as glycogen, right? So our liver does not store the same glucose which we take in. Instead, it converts that glucose into glycogen with the help of insulin. It's a hormone, right? With the help of insulin, it converts to glycogen and then it stores it. Remember? So insulin helps to convert glucose to glycogen. Now during emergency and flight conditions, when we require immediately large amount of glucose, we already have taken much of glucose and it is being stored in our body in the form of glycogen. But we need again to use that back immediately in a large quantity. We need only glucose. We can't use glycogen instead of glucose, right? So we need only glucose. So another hormone takes major part in this, which is known as glucagon, right? Glucagon, glucagon. Now this hormone helps us to convert during emergency or flight conditions. It helps to convert glycogen back to glucose. Why does it convert during emergency and flight conditions? Our body has stored glucose in the form of glycogen, and we cannot use glycogen directly. Instead, glucagon comes into place and converts glycogen back to glucose, where we can use this glucose back. So first, we take in glucose. To store that glucose, insulin is required because liver cannot store directly that glucose. Insulin converts glucose to glycogen and then it is being stored. And after that, to convert glycogen back to glucose, during emergency of flight conditions. At that time glucagon plays an important role. So remember that insulin as well as these glucagon are hormones, right? Glucagon as well as insulin, they both are hormones. So insulin converts glucose to glycogen. During emergency flight conditions when we require large amount of glucose, at that time glucagon converts glycogen to glucose, in which we can use the same form of glucose, right? So I'm sure that you have learnt about insulin. And so if you are asked to write the functions of insulin, the main function would be conversion of glucose to glycogen. The main function of glucagon would be conversion of glycogen back to glucose during emergency of flight conditions. That's it. And these both are hormones. And what is glycogen? We cannot store glucose directly in that form. That's why insulin, we are making sure that glucose gets converted to glycogen so we can store it. That is easy for it to store in the form of glycogen. So I'm sure you are clear with all these terms. So let's move on to another different hormone. I'll explain you it right now. Okay. So let's see about another hormone, new hormone, ADH hormone. ADH hormone. This is also a hormone similar to insulin as well as glucagon. Right? Now what does this hormone do? So it helps in reabsorbing of water from forming urine. Right? So what does ADH hormone do? It helps in reabsorbing of water from the forming urine. Now from where this ADH hormone is produced? They can ask you a question. Where does ADH hormone is being produced? It is being produced by the master gland. The master gland is the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland. Why is this known as the master gland? Because it functions both as a endocrine system, as endocrine gland, as well as a exocrine gland. It does the function of both types of gland. And this is the pituitary gland. It is known as the master gland. And ADH hormone is being produced by this gland. Now what does it do? Let me explain you. It helps in the reabsorbing of water from the forming urine. So when we take water, some of the other time we will excrete it in the form of urine. Now before the urine, the kidneys would be having the forming urine. Like before it gets released, there will be a place where it gets stored. At that place, this ADH hormone comes and it helps in the reabsorbing of most of the water back into the blood. So therefore it helps us not to feel thirsty, and yeah, that's it. It helps us not to feel thirsty, and it makes sure that we are not thirsty and we need not to drink more water. That ADH hormone does. But what if you don't have ADH hormone? So you keep on drinking water, and from the forming urine, ADH hormone won't because you don't have ADH hormone, so there won't be any reabsorbing of water from the forming urine. So you'll again excrete the urine, again you'll drink water, keep on excreting. So you'll complete all the time you'll be excreting, drinking water. You'll feel very thirsty. So those people who do not have ADH hormone would suffer these types of symptoms. So ADH hormone also plays a major role in this thing. So if you don't have ADH hormone, I will already explain you the symptoms, that you keep on drinking, you feel more thirsty continuously, you feel more thirsty. It won't keep you hydrated, right? So that's it. So I'm sure you learned about ADH, insulin, as well as glucagon, right? So now let's move to the main topic, classification of diabetes into two types, right? Mellitus and Insipidus. So let's begin with diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus can be classified again into two types. You can say type 1. There's no specific name, right? Type 1 and type 2. Now let me explain you the first type. So persons who suffer with diabetes mellitus would have less insulin produced in that. So you can say insulin production is less. Insulin, or you can say insulin which is produced, is less. Understood? So if there is less insulin, there will be less conversion of glucose to glycogen. Glycogen is the thing which our body can store in the form of glucose, right? Insulin which is produced is less in type 1 cases. So there will be less conversion of glucose. So there will be an excess of glucose in our body. And what did I say about diabetes? If there is an excess of glucose in blood, you can get diabetes. So type 1 people, insulin produces very less. So with this, they get diabetes, and it is classified under diabetes mellitus. Now let's discuss the type 2. Insulin is produced adequately See, now in type 2, insulin is produced adequately. Now you would think of, if insulin is produced adequately, then how these people gets affected in the type 2 case people, how they get affected by diabetes. Let me tell you. So insulin is produced adequately, that is for sure, but cells do not respond. Cells do not respond. So what does this tell you? So even if you produce insulin, the cells which takes the insulin and performs the actions according to the insulin, those do not respond. Then what is the use of insulin? Nothing. So you can conclude that insulin is not at all produced because cells do not respond, right? So those are type 2 cases. Now let me give you an example if you don't understand this. Suppose you write a letter to your friend, and if your friend doesn't know how to read it, then how would he be able to understand, and how would he be able to answer you, reply you? So there would be no use of the letter. Similarly, if cells do not respond, there would be no use of the insulin at all. No function of insulin would be taken care of. Here insulin is produced very less, so you can conclude that still there is an excess of glucose in blood. Here insulin is produced but cell does not respond. So cell will not go according to the functions of insulin, right? It wouldn't convert glucose to glycogen. So still there will be an excess of glucose in the blood, which again causes diabetes. So this is type 1 case, type 2 case. So I'm sure these both comes under diabetes mellitus. So I'm sure you understood type 1 cases, how they are being affected by diabetes. Type 2 cases, they have a different cause of being affected, but still they get affected by diabetes. So these people, type 1 cases, they take insulin through injections, right? For type 2 case, you can't do anything, but these people, they continuously take insulin through injections, so that the insulin quantity would be more, and there would be more conversion of glucose to glycogen. So there wouldn't be an excess of glucose, thus diabetes can be prevented. So but type 2 case people, how much ever insulin you give to it, cells do not respond. So even if you take insulin through injections, still the cell won't respond. Already there is an adequate amount of insulin, but the cell won't. Still the cell won't respond. There won't be any function according to insulin. So type 1 cases, they can take insulin through injections. They can try to prevent it, minimize the effects of diabetes. Type 2 cases, nothing can be done. So this is about diabetes mellitus. Now coming to Insipidus. So I'm sure that you remember that I taught you a different hormone today, which is ADH hormone. So if you know about ADH hormone, like if you have understood very clearly, these people, diabetes insipidus, they lack ADH. They lack ADH. So I've already, so these people who are being affected by diabetes insipidus, they do not have ADH hormone at all. So I told you what are the symptoms if you do not have ADH hormone. They continuously drink water, they feel thirsty, they urine more. That's it, right? So these people, ADH, there is no ADH hormone, so there won't be any reabsorbing of water from the forming urine. So they keep on drinking water, they keep on urinating more and more, and they'll feel thirsty all the times. So these people, they lack ADH and they suffer insipidus. These all reasons can be most of genes. Remember that because of genes, these all diseases is caused. Main thing is genes. So I'm sure you've understood about classification of diabetes, about the function of insulin, all the three hormones, insulin, glucagon, as well as main hormone ADH, which is produced by pituitary gland, as I said you, and the classification of diabetes mellitus and insipidus, type 1 case, type 2 case, and for type 1 case they can try to prevent it by taking injections of insulin. Type 2 case they lack ADH, it is caused by genes, and diabetes, you can say it is the excess of glucose in blood. And diabetes is a chronic disease. It can last lifelong or for many years. Rarely it can be prevented. So thanks for watching my video. If you really do like it, please hit on the like button and please understand this chapter carefully. So that's all for today, guys. Thank you.